Learn English with podcasts. Hello everyone, and welcome back to King English Podcast for learners who want to speak English with more confidence and fun. Today's topic I want to share is titled, "The woman who sees through him will always be the one he remembers." Most women are taught to look for signs of affection, to decode his words, to search for meaning in every gesture, every glance, every silence. But the woman he will never forget is the one who saw beyond the masks he didn't know he was wearing. She is not the one who tried to hold on. She is the one who looked through him, not with judgment, but with clarity. And in her gaze, he saw not who he pretended to be, but who he was afraid to become. There is something unnerving about being seen completely. For a man who has lived his life projecting strength, charm, certainty, and pride, being perceived without his armor feels like exposure. He has grown accustomed to performing roles: the confident provider, the stoic thinker, the desired lover. But deep beneath those personas lies the boy he buried, the fear he never faced, the shadow he never integrated. And it is only when a woman steps into that sacred space, not to chase, but simply to witness, that the illusion begins to crack. She is not naive. She is not blinded by the sparkle of potential or the adrenaline of attraction. She has done her own shadow work. She has walked through the terrain of her own emotional wounds and emerged not with bitterness, but with vision. Her presence carries the scent of freedom, the texture of knowing, the gravity of a soul that has tasted pain and transmuted it into wisdom. And so, when she meets him, she does not beg to be loved. She does not perform. She simply sees, and he feels it. In her stillness, in her silence, in the way she does not flinch when he withdraws or boasts or tests her with the games he has used on countless others. Her eyes do not plead for attention. Her energy does not wrap itself around his approval. She offers no reaction to control. And in that absence of control, he feels something he has long forgotten. He feels himself. You might think that the woman he remembers is the one who gave him everything, the one who waited, the one who forgave endlessly. But no, he failed to rise to it. She is unforgettable, not because she loved the loudest, but because she loved the deepest. Her love was not a transaction, it was a mirror. And when a man looks into that kind of mirror, he sees both his potential and his cowardice. She did not punish him for failing to meet her in the depths. She simply stepped back into her sovereignty, knowing that her presence was never meant to beg but to beckon. There is a sacred tension in feminine power, one that does not chase, but invites, one that does not scream, but radiates. He feels it long after she is gone, in quiet rooms, in silent nights, in women who cannot touch what she saw. He remembers how it felt to be seen without performance. He remembers the peace of not needing to impress and the terror of being that naked. What would you think if I told you that many men do not fear losing love, but fear being seen unworthy of it? And so they sabotage, they disappear, they provoke. Not because they do not care, but because they do not yet know how to be held in truth. They have not yet faced the boy inside who was told to be strong, not soft, to conquer, not connect, to seduce, not surrender. And when a woman walks in with the fire of feminine wisdom and the calm of self-possession, that fragile illusion begins to burn. She does not shrink to make him feel big. She does not inflate his ego to avoid rejection. She speaks with the weight of a woman who knows her voice is not a weapon, but a vibration. And in her presence, he sees the road he has not walked, the inner terrain of self-confrontation, of unhealed wounds, of truths buried beneath years of pretending. He may walk away from her. He may not understand in the moment what he has lost, but the soul remembers what the mind resists. And long after her name fades from his lips, the imprint of her vision lingers in his being. She saw through him, not around him. And there is no forgetting the one who dared to witness your shadow and still stood in love. There is a reason the myth of the muse has haunted the male psyche for centuries. She is not merely an object of desire. She is a mirror of the soul, an archetype of the anima that stirs in a man's unconscious, awakening not just for her body, but for his own wholeness. And when she arrives, not as fantasy, but as embodied feminine depth, she unsettles his carefully constructed world. He feels drawn to her, but he cannot name why. He is disarmed, not by what she does, but by what she sees in her presence. He begins to feel his fractures, the cracks in his confidence, the brittleness of his bravado, the echo of unmet needs he thought he had outgrown. She doesn't press. She doesn't demand an explanation. Her power lies in her restraint, her ability to hold space without collapsing into the chaos of his confusion. She listens not just to his words, but to the silences between them. She senses the weight of what he cannot say and offers no rescue. Because she knows the man who will rise must do so by choice, not by coaxing. And here lies the tension that defines her. She is not cold. She is not distant. But she does not bend her truth to accommodate his delay. She remains rooted in the clarity of her own worth. That clarity is not arrogance, it is sacred alignment. She has faced the abyss of abandonment, rejection, and disappointment. And instead of becoming bitter, she became sovereign. She no longer fears being alone. What she fears is betraying herself for the illusion of love. Most men are drawn to women who soothe their ego. But the woman he remembers is the one who challenged it not with cruelty, but with grace. Her energy whispered, "You are more than this." And in that whisper, he felt the pressure to evolve. That pressure was not hers to enforce. And when he chose silence over depth, performance over presence, she did not collapse. She withdrew, not out of anger, but out of reverence for herself and for the sacredness of truth. There are women who wait, who plead, who negotiate themselves into the corners of a man's indifference. And then there are women who recognize the pattern and step back, not out of pride, but out of awakening. She is the latter. She knows that if she has to shrink to be loved, it is not. Love is a performance of emotional survival, and she refuses to perform. You may wonder why a man can be surrounded by adoration, yet still feel haunted by the memory of one woman. It is not because she was the most beautiful. It is not because she loved him without limit. It is because she reflected back a version of himself that was unarmored, unpolished, and real. In her eyes, he saw a glimpse of the man he was meant to become, not the one he pretended to be. He might not have been ready. He might have turned away. But the truth is a living thing. It does not disappear. It waits patiently in the hidden corridors of the psyche, and the image of her clear, grounded, radiant in her restraint, becomes a compass he cannot throw away. She did not chase. She did not explain herself repeatedly. She simply chose herself when he would not rise. This is the feminine power the world has long tried to dilute. It is not loud. It is not controlling. It is deeply intuitive, anchored in the earth of knowing. She does not need to be chosen to feel worthy. She is not addicted to the game of winning affection. She sees clearly, acts precisely, and leaves silently when the soul contract is not met. And so he remembers her, not for what she gave, but for what she awakened, not for how she stayed, but for how she departed. He tells no one. He moves on, dates others, builds a life that looks full. But there is a corner of his inner world that remains untouched, a space only she ever entered, because in that space he was fully seen and he turned away. She holds no resentment, does not watch him from afar, hoping for his return. Her path winds forward, deeper into her own becoming. She does not wait for a man to catch up. She blesses what was, honors what could have been, and walks with the quiet dignity of one who has reclaimed her throne. There comes a moment, often years later, when he sits in silence no distractions, no voices, no validation, and he feels it. Not a memory, not a fantasy, but a presence. The imprint she left, not on his body, but on his becoming. He remembers. Not what she said, but how she made him feel, that he was more than his defense mechanisms, more than his charm, more than his achievements. That in her gaze, he had the chance to shed the performance and stand raw in his truth. And he didn't single quote to regret. It's a quiet kind of fire. It doesn't rage like heartbreak. It simmers. And the woman who sees through him then leaves with dignity, becomes the match that lit it, not to punish, but to awaken. Because true awakening rarely comes from comfort, it comes from contrast. She was that contrast. Him affection, she showed him his limits, not to shame, but to reveal. And once something is revealed, it cannot be unseen. He may love again. He may even convince himself that what they had was just timing, a passing season. But late at night, when all his masks have fallen and the world no longer claps, he feels the weight of the opportunity he once held, the depth he could have entered, the mirror he turned away from. She asked nothing from him except for him to be real, and he could not do it, not because he was cruel, but because he had not yet met himself. And she knew that. She always knew. She saw the distance between his image and his essence, not with judgment, but with heartbreaking clarity. And she stayed for a while, not to fix, not to heal, but to offer a path, a window, a way through. But when he stayed, at the edge of that opening, refusing to leap, she did not curse him. She simply closed the door. If you have ever been that woman, if you felt the ache of loving a man who could not meet you, it is not because you were too much. It is because you were the mirror of everything he had not yet faced. And that mirror is not always welcomed. The ego fights it. The unconscious runs from it. But the soul remembers. This is the legacy of the feminine when it is rooted in truth. She does not tether herself to a man's potential. She sees it, honors it, and releases it if he cannot rise. Because she knows that her love is not meant to convince, it is meant to awaken. And not every man is ready to wake up. Still, she walks, not hardened, not closed, but refined. Her silence is sacred. Her tears are prayers. Her detachment is not cold, is holy. It says, I see who you could be, but I will not bleed to prove it. I will not lower my vibration to hold your hand. If you cannot meet me in truth, then I meet myself there instead. And this is what he will never forget. Not the conversations, not the laughter, not even the intimacy, but the way she held herself when he could not hold her. The way she saw him fully, then stepped away with a kind of power that cannot be bought, taught, or replicated. This is the woman who becomes a myth in his memory, not a fantasy, but a truth he could not embody. And until he meets her energy again in another or within himself, he will feel her absence as a reminder. She did not leave because she stopped caring. She left because he stopped becoming. And you, the woman reading this, must remember, your power is not in being remembered. It is in being real. In being so deeply anchored in your own soul that you never beg a man to meet you there. You simply open the door, offer your hand, and walk alone if he does not move. Not because you are heartless, but because you are whole. Asterisk, wholeness is not found in being chosen by another. It is forged in the fires of self-recognition in the quiet moments, when you no longer crave to be understood, but instead embody understanding. The woman who sees through him knows this. She does not need him to validate her worth or echo her vision. She is the ocean deep, vast, undemanding, and only those who have learned to swim through their own shadows can meet her without drowning. The man she saw was not unworthy. He was simply unready. And unready love is the most dangerous kind. It mimics connection, mimics intimacy, even mimics devotion. But beneath the surface, it is the child crying out for rescue, the boy trapped behind layers of survival and self-doubt. She could have stayed. She could have mothered him, held him through his storms, sacrificed her boundaries to make him feel safe. But that is not the role of the sovereign woman. She is not here to raise a man. She is here to walk beside one. There are men who will tell you that she was too difficult, too intense, too much. But what they mean is, she did not bend. She did not yield to emotional immaturity. She did not abandon her truth to soothe his insecurity. And that, to the uninitiated masculine, is terrifying, because it exposes what he has long hidden. Not through conflict, but through clarity. The woman who sees through him does not weaponize her insight. She does not use it to control, to shame, or to elevate herself. No, she simply holds it like a flame in the dark. And when he cannot sit in the light, when he retreats into the familiar shadows of ego, she lets him go, because she knows that a man must walk his own path to wholeness. She cannot walk it for him. Her love cannot be a crutch. Her presence cannot be a shortcut. It is in this restraint that her true power lives. In the way she resists the temptation to rescue. In the way she does not plead to be seen. In the way she walks away not because she does not care, but because she refuses to betray her soul to remain close. This is what haunts him. This is what lingers. That he was seen so deeply and still lost her, and in losing her, he is forced to face the question, what part of me could not stand in that light? What wound did I protect so fiercely that I let her go, rather than let her love me into truth? These are not easy questions. They are the kind that pierce the psyche, unravel illusions, and expose the parts of self that have never known love without condition. But that is the gift of her vision. It wounds only to awaken. And if he is wise, the soul is ready, he will take that wound and walk the long, painful path toward his own becoming. But she will not wait. She has mountains to climb, oceans to cross, stars to speak with. She has her own becoming, and she knows, if he ever returns, it will not be as the boy she once loved. It will be as the man she once saw buried beneath fear. A man who has done the work. A man who can finally stand in her light, not because he needs it, but because he has found his own. There is a sacred silence that follows her. The kind that says, I gave what was true. I stayed as long as love lived, and I left before I betrayed myself. This is the silence that wraps around him long after she is gone, more profound than any word spoken, more intimate than any touch exchanged. In it, he begins to understand something ancient, something he was never taught but always felt, that real love does not ask you to perform. It asks you to become. And becoming is not easy. It is the unraveling of armor, the surrender of pride, the confrontation with shame. The man who once stood confidently in the world may find himself humbled by the memory of a single woman who asked for none of his titles, none of his masks, only his essence, and when he could not give it, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't yet know how, she left. Not as punishment, but as prophecy. A mirror removed, so he might learn to find one within. She continues on her path, not closed, but wise. There is a quiet, magnetic confidence in the way she moves through the world now. She no longer waits to be seen. She sees herself. She no longer hopes to be chosen. She chooses. And when love arrives again, it always does, she does not ask it to complete her. She asks it only to meet her, fully, truthfully, without illusion. For she has walked through the fire of loving a man who could not love himself. She has felt the ache of knowing someone's soul while they hid from their own reflection. She has stood at the gate of potential, offering not pressure but presence, and been turned away. And through that pain, she found her power, not the power to control, but the power to release. To trust that love is never wasted, even when it isn't returned. To understand that her worth is not tied to how deeply someone sees her, but how deeply she refuses to abandon herself to the man who remembers her. She becomes more than a memory. She becomes a myth, a moment of clarity in the blur of his life, a reminder that there was once a woman who did not ask him to be anyone but himself, and in failing to be that, he lost her, and in losing her, he met the truth. And you, if you are that woman, must never shrink your depth for those who fear drowning. Your seeing is not a curse, is a blessing, a rare, holy fire that not every man can hold. But the one who can, the one who has faced his shadow and walked through the night of his own reckoning, he will not run from your gaze. He will stand in it, burn in it, and rise through it. Not because he needs saving, but because he is ready to be seen. She will always be the one he remembers. Not for the way she touched him, but for the way she touched something he didn't know existed in him. The woman who sees through him awakens not desire, but destiny. And that kind of awakening is not easily forgotten. A woman who knows her worth does not pursue, she chooses. Asterisk, the end. Asterisk, please like and share my video for everyone to learn English.